Hello, everyone. This is the Scale Podcast, and this is your host, Melinda Dollywall. We are joined here today by Boris Wertz, who needs no introduction. Now, I'm always excited to talk to Boris personally because I learned something new. So, Boris, thank you for joining us today. So, let's start right at the beginning. Just Books. How did that come about? Tell us the origin story.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to chat today, share a little bit of my story, both as an entrepreneur as well as an investor. So Just Books was a company I co-founded back in Germany in 99, so Internet 1.0. Huge excitement around this new platform in a little bit in the same way that there's huge excitement about AI right now. And we started this company to create a marketplace for used rare out-of-print books. Sounded like a little bit of a boring idea, kind of a very niche market, but it really leveraged the strength of this new platform of making inventory that was locked up in physical stores available to anyone in the world. And so we had all this inventory from local bookstores that we uploaded into this database, was immediately searchable and buyable for anyone on the internet. In 2001, sold it to 8Books, which was a Canadian competitor of ours that wanted to expand to Europe. Put the two companies together. I moved over to Canada as a part of that transaction. So we continued to build. Sold it to Amazon in 2008. So great ride from 99 to 2008. Lots of lessons learned as an entrepreneur. Yeah, that was my entrepreneurial journey.
Wonderful. And I think when you talk to founders, we've hosted you for several events, there is a depth that comes from being an operator. Having been an operator is completely different than just starting out as an associate in a fund and moving up. So one of the questions that come up a lot when we talk to founders is they're chasing a lot of ideas. And there's an opportunity cost to chasing the wrong one for too long. And did this ever come up where you had to make choices, or did it just naturally? Well, if there was a formula, somebody's chasing 6 ideas, especially an AI engineer right now. Is there something you can say that might be useful to them?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's two ways to think about it, right? I mean, the first one is a little bit top down. When you think about an idea, is how unique and interesting is it in the current marketplace? Are you the number 10, or are you really one that is creating an idea? Secondly, in this whole top-down approach is, are you really leveraging the strength, the uniqueness of this technical platform shift that is happening? And something we call, back in the days, would say 8Books and Just Books were really internet native. It leveraged the internet as a technology. Uber was mobile native. Like Uber without mobile, you wouldn't have started. And today we're thinking about what are AI native businesses, right? So things that really leverage that technology in a very unique way. But then there's obviously always the kind of the bottoms up approach of finding product market fit, getting feedback from customers. And I think that's a little bit more subjective in terms of how long do you bang your head against the wall? Are you just too early, or is the idea bad? Are you just communicating the product not properly and don't get the right customer feedback? But I feel like evaluating this approach of how long do you go after an idea? Is it a good idea? It's both a mix of top down, as I mentioned, and bottoms up.
Brilliant. I mean, this is really succinct way of putting it. I think this would be a popular soundbite from this episode. Thank you for that. So talking about Just Books, some founders are, let's build as much as possible, then start to get the product market fit and talk to the first customer, because then you know that it is a real thing. So with Just Books, how did you make your first dollar or your first Deutschmark in that case?
Yeah, I mean, so we really got out as quickly as possible, and it was a pretty imperfect product, but it was a little bit like a land grab. There was tons of white space, obviously, in the internet at the time, but lots of people were thinking about similar ideas. So we tried to get out as quickly as possible. And that was helpful. It was not a perfect product, but it really got us early feedback. And I still remember we launched in October '99 and went to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I had this huge screen where you could kind of search on our site. We showed it to people, and it was just amazing when somebody was looking for a specific book, and it was actually now a database, and you couldn't believe it. It's like, actually, it's working. And then you saw the first orders coming in, and it's like, oh wow, people are actually using it and buying it, right? And so it's a magical moment where you get that customer feedback, and you see people using it and actually creating some value for them. So from that point of view, I think the earlier you can get out and get customer feedback, the better. Having said that, there's some areas where if you don't have a complete product, you can't really compete. It's if you, for example, build something along the lines of an operating system for a small business. If that operating system doesn't let you take payments, then you can't be an operating system, right? Like it's ultimately if you don't have core functionality that you really need for a certain category, it's tough. But otherwise, I think the advice is always go out quickly and get customer feedback as early as possible, versus sitting in your room and kind of in your office and kind of building for something that you don't really know people need.
Yeah, I think maybe one way for healthcare, a lot of projects we work with, is find the quickest application with the least amount of risk, but get it out. I mean, get it out of the lab in this case, and get it in the hands of the customers.
Yeah,
and
correct.
That's how you know. One of the things that technology world is one way or the other is some people are all about moving fast and breaking things and fixing later. And and there is like a judgment call. And, a friend of mine, she came from traditional governance from large organizations, invested in a startup, got on a board, and she practically pulled all her hair out because it's all about how quickly can you move, and then you go back, fix things based on your, experience as a founder, as an investor. Do you have any, I'm going to say, general principle on that? A couple examples where moving fast and breaking things was a good idea and where it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jeff Bezos once had this like really interesting differentiation between one-way doors and two-way doors, right? And so the idea of if there's a decision that is a one-way door, you go down a certain path. It's very, very hard to undo it, right? You obviously think about that decision much longer, and it would not be good to break things in the process, right? Two-way doors are these little experiments, the little decisions where you can easily reverse it and change it, right? And so I think one example would be of a one-way door. If you really go into the enterprise as a, previously you sold to small businesses, you go into the enterprise and your first product that you sell to enterprise is just not enterprise ready, right? It's usually that first impression would not be great in a market where travels fast, because there's a limited amount of buyers, right? And so, really think about that. But otherwise, just the speed of iteration, the speed of decision taking, the speed of learning, it's just so important, right? And don't worry too much about mistakes you might do in the process if you can reverse them. But I think getting the whole team to move quickly, take decision quickly, and learn is just so important in the startup market.
Oh, thank you. That's brilliant. So next, near-death experiences, and we've talked about events that you were at. They were project you invest in, and then it's like, oh, it's gone, and 2 years later, it's still alive, and it's actually better now. So, and this is where, as an investor, you just written a check and it's like, okay, it will come back but as a founder, what is there any advice that you can give somebody who's going through? There is still a little bit of hope, but when would you give up? And this is after you've raised some money and it's real business. Is there a time to pivot after which it is too late to pivot? And do you have any general theory on that?
Yeah. So listen, I think this is one of the toughest decisions as a founder, right? To take, when to give up, when to move on. And I think there's a few principles I would kind of keep in mind. I mean, the first one is obviously, what do you have as a founder left in you in terms of energy, excitement about the market, excitement about the product you're building, right? If you're tired, if you have moved on mentally from that, like there's no point in kind of pushing through, right? I think the second thing I would always kind of also keep in mind is just the opportunity cost of you continue to work on something that doesn't work out. Kind of often kind of the 20s to the 30s are some of your most productive years, right? Of being able to build companies with very little other obligations, time commitments, financial obligations, etc. So I hope you can use them in the most productive way, and sometimes just a pivot or kind of a moving on might be the right decision. But having said all that, it's never a straight path. It's never clear, right? And we had kind of sometimes we have hard discussions within our portfolio with our portfolio founders and tell them it might be the right time to move on, because we've seen them struggling in the market and we feel like they might be not spending their time in the right place. And it's usually not an easy discussion to have, because it's their baby, it's what they're passionate about, and you tell them that they should move on. Most of the times, I think in hindsight, people realize we should have done that much earlier. And it's amazing to see how then, once you kind of take that step, how you have a mental flexibility again to think about something new and potentially find something you're even more excited about and you're more successful in.
Yeah, and move on. It's those discussions are hard ones. And, as an investor, I always tell founders that, at breakfast, the difference between what is the difference between chicken and a pig? The chicken was interested, but the pig was committed. So we are just interested, but they're committed. So it's a completely different. And the other thing that founders say a lot, I exited too early. I should have stayed with it. And it's the same founders, like they can't wait to get out, can't wait to sell. And then they think it was too early because now that it could have. So when you exited Just Books to 8 Books and 8 Books to Amazon, how did you know it was the right time to sell?
So I think in the first case, Just Books to 8 Books, it was really a necessity. 2001, it was nuclear winter in terms of fundraising. The internet bubble had burst. There was no way for us to survive as a standalone entity. I think we got lucky that we had an acquirer that was committed, that was bootstrap, was profitable. So, they had like the means to kind of take on our business. So that was really a necessity. I think the second transaction, when we sold 8 Books to Amazon, that was more of, kind of, I think we had run out of ideas to grow the business. As 8 Books, we thought about going into other categories, music and movies, but those two digitized very quickly. So it was a complete different business model. We thought about going international and had done that in Europe, but looked at Asia and felt like that was like too risky for a smallish business like us. We had kind of gone up and down the value chain and bought companies that were sending traffic to us and other companies that helped our sellers to sell in different channels. So we felt like we had really optimized everything in that business. It was a solid business. It was profitable. It was growing 10-15%, but there wasn't much kind of white space left for us. We ran out of ideas, and it was the right time to sell the company. So I really feel like these are usually two of the reasons to sell. Either you have to, or you run out of ideas, and then the third one is probably if the founders run out of energy, because kind of ultimately startups are made by the energy of founders, and if they run out of energy, then it's time to sell. But overall, I think one thing I only appreciated over time is getting to a certain point of scale, like surviving the first 3-4 years, right? Getting to some scale, that's the toughest part. So once in that position, and you're in a market that is growing, and you have ideas how to grow the business, stick with it. I mean, the compounding of the value you're creating is just so interesting. And my first instinct, perhaps as a founder back in the days, as a young founder, was to sell the business. But today, I think like it's an incredible privilege if you started something that has started to become successful. If you have the energy, if you have the ideas to grow it, kind of keep at it. It only gets better, more interesting, in a certain way, easier.
Oh, brilliant. So it's about the energy, how you feel personally, and how much you're putting in. That is moving on to your role now as an investor. And when you evaluate companies, are there any themes that are constant in the 10 years you've done it, and some things that have changed?
Yeah. So I think actually things have stayed the same, just my mental model has probably changed, right? It's really a combination of two things: a special founder or a special founding team, right? That is in for the right reasons, is extremely passionate about a certain space, is complementary in their skills and talents, and that team working at the edges of technology, early in a new wave, right? Where there's going to be lots of potential kind of down the road, just by the pure fact that the market is exploding, right? And so I think if you get a special team early in a wave, good things will happen, right? And that was back in 2010. Lots of marketplaces and SaaS were kind of at the beginning of a real explosion. In 2016, 17, it started with crypto, right? In 2020, climate really started to take off. Today, it's probably AI and deep tech, right? And so you just have to kind of figure out how do you identify these special teams, right? And what are interesting areas you're excited about, teams are excited about, that are at the edges of technology. And if you have that filter, then it really helps you kind of identify some of the best opportunities.
Well, no discussion these days would be complete without talking about AI. So what's your thoughts on the promises and perils, where we are going as an industry, and investing in startups and building startups in AI?
Yeah. So first of all, I think AI is obviously the most exciting technology, tons of potential. And I think everyone was surprised how quickly these LLMs, and then also the rapid pace of ongoing innovation that we see in that space. Now, the challenge is a little bit that AI is also at this stage very much an incumbents game, right? If that is Google or Facebook or Amazon, you name it, they all have incredible amount of data. They have incredible amount of resources. They have incredible amount of distribution, right? And it's going to be generally tough to compete against these incumbents, right? And so I think one of the things I would encourage everyone: what is a narrow field where you don't compete against incumbents, right? Because lots of these incumbents, and it's not even the very large ones, right? But every enterprise vertical where there's somebody that has already scale and data, they're all going to kind of see AI as an accelerant of their business, a potential threat to their business. So they're all over it, right? And so find areas where you don't have to fight against incumbents, because when you look at the long-term trend of how much of the value created in a certain platform shift has gone to startups versus incumbents, it has favored the incumbents for some time now. Like the internet obviously was almost all went to startups, right? The Barnes and Nobles of the world, the Toys of the world, the Walmarts of the world, didn't really capture much of the value of the internet. In the mobile wave, already kind of there was a moment where people said, "Oh, mobile search is a huge opportunity," but mobile search was ultimately Google, right? Mobile social networking, right, was an opportunity, but ultimately it was Facebook, right? Mobile commerce will redefine everything, but ultimately it was Amazon that captured all of that, right? So mobile already, most of the value went to the incumbents. Very little was created by startups, right? And the same is to be expected with AI, because the network effects, the scale advantages that the incumbents have only gotten more important since mobile, right? And so you just have to pick your battles, and be careful about that.
Oh, that's a brilliant point. One of the things when you see all these, you read the investment, and this startup is raising $1 billion, this startup is raising $1 billion. But when you looked at the stock prices of Nvidia, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, the startup raises pale as compared to what they have earned since AI came in. And a lot of people missed the point, and I'm glad you brought that up. What would you predict in 12 months that's happening in the AI and investing in the entire industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this saying that technology changes are short-term overestimated, long-term underestimated, right? I think we're in the short-term overestimation, right? Obviously, the consumer experience of these LLMs is amazing, right? People are blown away. I think it will take longer to actually get them into enterprises, into applications that work consistently well, that are consistently used by consumers, etc. So I think there's a good chance that the next 12 months are a little bit more underwhelming in terms of what we expect right now.
Yeah.
But make no mistakes, kind of the long-term trend is we underestimate how much AI will transform kind of business verticals, whole economies.
Yeah.
So exciting to see what's happening long term.
Yeah.
But short term, it might be a little bit more bumpy.
Yeah, it's really important. Multiple changes changed the world in a big way. One was the printing press, then electricity, then internet, and then AI. And I fully see that. And, all other changes, internet took about 20 years. Rest of them took as many as 100 years to implement. So we are in for exciting times. And this is the super early for AI. And it's exciting to say with the lens of what we know and we've seen in the past. So when it comes to, if you had to pick a few ideas, like founders who's listening to this, they're wanting to start companies in AI. Is there things that you can list that you think would be useful to them to know that these are markets would be good? And of course, when ChatGPT 5 comes out, a lot of this will change. We know that your predictions are only good till ChatGPT 5 comes out.
I mean, listen, like I think the opportunities fall into two areas, right? The straightforward one is take any vertical where there is a high human labor cost for knowledge work, right? And automate that through AI, right? I think it's pretty straightforward. I think this is the business case for a bunch of companies that we're currently seeing, right? And I think, just to my point before, you just have to be careful who you're competing against, right? And who is already in there. I think the second one is then, what are these AI native ideas, like things that are only possible today that weren't possible before? And that's always very hard to predict, like where that will come up, because it's new behavior. It's completely innovative and unforeseeable. So I'm generally super interested in that second category, but I'm not the one to come up with the exact ideas. These are entrepreneurs, and so we'll see what they're coming up with. But that's certainly the area that is super interesting to watch and observe over the next 12 months.
So when you look evaluating the startups and founders are talking to you, so is there trends that you see? And a lot of it is I'm going to say personal bias or personal experience of the investors. There are things that give you the green light. Okay, let's talk more to these founders, and the things that are the red light. Oh, this doesn't work for me. So do you have any of those patterns of behavior?
Yeah, I think one of the questions is always, how passionate are you about the area that you're going after,
Mm-hmm.
how unique is your train of thought around how to attacking it, right? And so on one end of the spectrum, you have what I would call opportunistic founders that jump on a big wave coming in top down,
Mm-hmm.
right? They say, hey, AI is big, AI and legal seems to be big, but you're kind of the number 10 startup that is going at it, right? Versus people that have kind of a long-term commitment to solving a certain problem, and they might just use a new technology platform as a way to accelerate, right? And so if somebody comes around and says like, kind of, I've been thinking about automating lawyers for a long period of time, and I've perhaps done a startup in that space that just creates standard documents and templates and sold it as a marketplace. But now I think like I can automate all of that in a much bigger way with AI. Has been in that sector for a long time, really understands it. Perhaps is the first one to come up with that idea. Like that's kind of the type of founders you're excited about versus the ones that come in late, top down, and feel opportunistic.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Steve Martin who said you can make up with persistence that you lack in talent. So I would not write off the guys who are just so determined that they will figure it out because they're opportunistic. They're like, this is where to jump on. But you're right. You're absolutely correct. You have to stick with something for 7 to 10 years. And if you're going to get bored, that would become hard. And talking about the roller coaster, as a founder, you can have the best day of the week and the worst day of the week on the same day. So that takes a toll on you if you don't care about the bigger picture of staying with it because you're passionate about a problem. So you've been a founder, and as a portfolio of founders right now, do you have any advice on how they can take care of themselves during all this? Because it's hard to be a founder. It's a tough job.
Yeah. I think a few things. I mean, the first one is like, I really hope that you have a great team of co-founders. I always felt like we were 5 co-founders back in the days, and I felt like there was always a situation where one was down, but the others were up, and vice versa. And I think it really helps to manage an emotional roller coaster with co-founders that support you, have perhaps a different perspective. And so I think that's the first thing, right? I think the second one is really kind of zooming out and taking the long view. Obviously, as a founder, it's all about urgency, lots about short-term pressure, making payroll, etc. But if you zoom out and say, hey, listen, I'm extremely passionate about solving this specific problem. Lots of challenges ahead, but if I continue to focus on creating value for our customers, kind of hiring smart people that help me in that mission, something good will happen. Like it might be bumpy, it might be not straightforward, right? It might take longer than I wished for, but as long as you kind of stay committed to the mission and the long-term opportunity, something good will happen, right? And so that feels to me like the 2 most important things. Hopefully you have a co-founder that is aligned with you, co-founders, and then secondly take the long-term view and kind of try to abstract away a little bit the short-term pressure and kind of chaos and kind of the difficulties of managing a startup on a daily basis, which is an incredible.
The co-founder point is quite brilliant. Is you have to be all 120% excited when you talk to investors. You have to be when you're talking to employees, when you're talking to customer. You have to draw the energy from somewhere. And co-founder is one co-founder or co-founders are the people where you can actually tell the truth. You don't. So and sometimes you need that. So you had 5 co-founders, and ideal way to have a co-founder is somebody you worked with 10 years ago, and then they're moving up in somewhere in life, and you are, and then you meet and the stars connect. But if somebody were to look for a co-founder, is there an art and a science or a method that you can use to evaluate people work with?
No, I think the best thing is probably just try to work with them in a formal way for some time and see how you work together. I think I'm not a big fan of kind of the very quick decision, and it's a long-term commitment. You have to see how people work in different situations, and you see them on a continuous basis. So I would spend some time um, together, right? And perhaps it's even in a very informal way, right? Definitely, I wouldn't recommend having like us being five co-founders. I think that's also too large of a group. But at the time, we didn't know any better. I would say like two, three, a team of two, three is usually perfect. Everything else gets too large. But yeah, definitely spend your time.
Back in Germany and building Just Books again, what would you do different?
I think three things that I learned, right? The first one is definitely a smaller founder group, right? Secondly, we had like one one technical co-founder, but he didn't really program. So we had an agency, and that helped us. And that just doesn't really work. I think like we were too many business people, not enough technical people. And then the third one is I think at some stage we didn't really focus enough on what really mattered. You know, sometimes you get distracted by too much money or too much growth potential to try out a lot of things and add a lot of things, right? And perhaps you can try them out, but then you also have to remove them and kind of figuring out like what ultimately mattered. And I think we got a little bit distracted by that, which is a typical thing in startups, right? Especially when there are good times in terms of enough capital. So that would be my thing. I think it's like when you take it together, it's like a small group that is a good mix of different skills, including technical and sales skills. That is super focused on solving a problem and knowing what the levers are to solve that problem. That's like the most beautiful setup.
That is a brilliant point.